If it doesn't work, we'll change. But what I'd like to do is we have a chat bar on the right, and it's right by participants, bottom right. So if you click that, you'll see a chat. It's to everyone. So leave it on to everyone. And if you want to speak, just say, just put your name there, or I want to talk, or I have a comment, whatever you want to do, and then I can follow that here on mine and call on people in order. If that doesn't work, we'll do something else. But okay, do we have everybody from Burns and McDonald? Somebody's on mute. Ryan.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have DeBashius and also John Christensen.
Are they in your office?
Yeah. No. DeBashius is trying to dial in by phone, and that's not working either. Apologies for the technical difficulties.
Oh, I've sure had them. Don't worry about that.
Gremlins.
No, it's
Ryan. Is it Tobias that we're having issues with?
Yeah, Adrian, it's DeBashius.
Okay, I'll send him an email directly here.
Okay, also John Christensen as well.
Okay.
all right. Well, let's they'll work that out. Let's go ahead and get started. I don't see anybody in the chat. Somebody put their name in and we'll get started. I still don't see anyone, and it's not coming up on my screen. So I guess this means nobody has anything they want to say. Hello? Okay, let's see who we have on here. Let's go through. We got Michael. Michael, do you have any comments? Do you want to speak?
Not at this time.
Okay. Let me see. Whoops, wait a minute. It just jumped around on me. Somebody joined.
Reed, I think Peter was trying to speak.
Yes, can you hear me, Reed?
Well, put your name in the chat. Let's use the process. And yes, I will recognize you.
Okay.
Put your name in so we'll be in the queue. Just say Peter and hit enter. Right at the bottom right. Maybe it's just not working. Go ahead, Peter. It didn't ever come up here.
There you go. How about now?
Yep, it got it. You're in.
Good. I'm all about process and procedures, Reed, so I'm good to follow them. So I just wanted to get a good understanding of the format for today, the agenda. I know it's a Q&A with Burns and McDonald, but just didn't know there was going to be any kind of introduction as far as where we are right now with the modeling from their perspective or any of that input back to us before we get started with our input. So just wanted to get a good handle.
I thought we were, but I'm not sure the people that were going to do it are on yet.
I see.
So, we can do one of two things. Did you, Brian or Matt, did y'all have something prepared to talk about before we, at DeBash, I talked to him that he thought he was going to do that, but I don't know if y'all concluded whether you are or not.
Yeah, I'll try to fill in while DeBashius is getting on. Yeah, as our understanding, the purpose of this call is to field questions from the RAC. And as far as process, where the study is, we can only report on what we have on our side. And you know, I don't know if it's if John is on, if he wanted to comment on where the overall process is. John, are you on?
Yes, this is John Cossip. I'm on.
Okay.
Yeah, I can give you a brief update. Can't get to my video right now, Reed, but where we're at. If you think of scorecard and the things that we needed to fill in, the affordability is a big one. We're doing a lot of work to develop the bill impacts, revenue requirements, and then which includes the other scenarios and the reference case. So reference scenario, the 3 other scenarios, several sensitivities. It all adds up to 50 results. So we're crunching through all that now. A lot of work going on there, and we're on track currently to have that available to present at the November 17th RAC meeting. So that's all I have, unless there's any questions or comments.
All right, thanks, John.
Go ahead. Who's up?
I was going to continue on. So just from our standpoint, we have been going through materials as we have received it. It's, in our opinion, probably best that we see everything before we start offering opinions on results. We don't have enough yet to form opinions. Certainly, though, we'll be taking logging all of the questions that are asked through this meeting and also the afternoon meeting. And if we're not able to provide answers on this call, we'll be sure to develop answers and send those out at a later date. We do have 2 questions we received, I believe, through Ann, and we understand there are additional questions that will be headed our way shortly. So that's where things stand on our end. And otherwise, I think we're ready to go ahead and hop in and start fielding questions.
Well, why don't you explain or at least let everybody else know what the questions that you've received. And I would particularly, while I understand you can't speak to which portfolio is the best in which scenarios, I was hopeful that we would get some review by you on the assumptions such as demand curves, price curves for natural gas, price curves for carbon costs, those type of things. I'm assuming that y'all are already reviewing those basic assumptions.
Yes, we've started to review all of the assumptions, certainly. And I think perhaps we can provide our view at a high level at this point, but we're still looking at, I know we're looking at the commodity curves in more detail, and we're also looking at the scenario and the assignments of the curves to the various scenarios. Same with the demand forecast. We're still in the process of reviewing those, but I think that's something we can address at a high level. As far as questions we've received, and I can hear myself, so that means Debashis was able to join. Debashis, are you on? There he is.
Can you hear me? Yeah, can you hear? Okay,
Yeah.
so I've dialed in from my using the phone, so not the WebEx link. So, but if you can hear me, I think I'm good. So.
Okay, and we were just Debash is covering the overall process. John provided an update on where they are in the modeling. And Reed just had a question. He was hoping to get insights on inputs and assumptions on this call. And he had also asked about what questions we have been asked so far. So I think I'll turn it over to you at this point.
Right. Good morning, everyone, and apologize for dialing in a bit late, having some technical issues here. But to answer your question, really, is that we have been, progressively, working with CPS and CRA in getting, as we review stuff, getting more data. I mean, we have received some of the data requests. CRA has been pretty responsive to our data requests so far. And as we have been, receiving those data, we are reviewing that. But we are not there fully yet in terms of having a full review of all the data. And there are some data that is still outstanding that we still waiting on to get from CRA. But so at this point, I think it's difficult for us to provide deep dive analysis of the work that has been done based on the data that we have reviewed so far. But we are in the process of doing that. And so if you have any, I would say, any questions related to specifically on the data, on the information that was presented from the reference case in the earlier meeting this month, then we can surely go over those get those questions, and then we can start working on getting you a response via email after the call. We could still need some time to review those questions and get you a more detailed response then.
Okay, so let's set the level here, so everyone will know and they don't ask duplicate questions. What questions are you working on, and which assumptions or inputs are you focusing on? Can you elaborate on that so everyone on the call will know what's been asked and what you're working on, and potentially what you don't have that you need from CRA?
So we have received only two questions thus far, and those questions came in last evening. So one question was related to the load forecast and whether the load forecast, considers the extremes, or whether the load forecast that is currently being used covers all the possible load growth in the future. Related to that, and then we also received a question regarding how battery disposal costs, or whether those are included in the analysis or not. So these were the two questions that came in, and we are looking at we have received the load forecast report from CPS that was done by ITRON, and we are reviewing that. And I wanted our load forecast personalities also trying to join in here if it's not already in. But so we are reviewing the load forecast and can find and will provide a response to that in general later on. And regarding the battery disposal cost, I think again, typically I would think that the batteries are that the assumptions for the batteries, we haven't looked through that in details yet. But if it is a PPA option that that CPS is considering, or if that's part of the reference case, then the cost for the batteries, that is not going to be on CPS books. So that's the PPA price is expected to be all inclusive. But we haven't verified that formally with CPS. That is typically what we see if it's a PPA option, and so we will again formalize that response when we via email once we have that. In terms of the data that we have requested, I think we have requested more detailed data outputs, which CRA is working on, like detailed outputs regarding the unit generation, unit level details, details regarding some of the cost assumptions, and the thought and the I would say the approach that they have taken in trying to develop those. Some of it has already been provided by CRA, and we are so I would say we are right now at the second level, so I'm going to go back and clarifying a few things in trying to understand that, and that's what we are waiting for CRA to provide as well.
When are you expecting the reply for that?
Reply to what? From CRA.
Yes. When do you think you will have what you need to do your work?
Well, that's when I'm hoping that we should get those data in this week by end
Okay.
of the day tomorrow.
Okay. All right. So let's. I think we've heard what the questions are. Let's start. And Peter's back in the queue. So I think you're in 3 times. So go ahead, Peter.
Sorry about that, Reed. So I had submitted a question, but it was early this morning, and I had sent it through Ann, so I don't think it got across. But I can give it to you now. So during a recent MUC meeting, a Municipal Utilities Committee meeting, a concern was raised that CPS was consideration of potentially increasing its reserve margin up to 25% to maintain internal capacity. And as we know, ERCOT's currently 13.7 as and it's a constraint in the model from what I understand. So the question is, should this type of potential increase be factored into the model within a scenario?
Peter, I didn't hear quite a 25% increase. What I heard Rudy say was he would like to have a larger one somewhere in the 15 to 18% range. But you are correct. There was a discussion on that. The question was by Anna Sandoval. And I guess the question I would have on that is this is a cost minimization LP. That is a constraint. So perhaps we could get that information off the shadow price. And if y'all are not, if that's not available to you, it might be a way to answer that question. Any response to that from Burns and Mac?
One, just to follow up here. So I'm not sure, but so you mentioned that CPS Energy is planning on a 25% reserve margin.
No, I think it's not. No, they're planning on a, and John can jump in on this. They're planning on a somewhere around 13% and change.
Yeah, 13.7.
Yeah, but Rudy made a comment he would like to have a larger one to this committee for the city council. And that immediately brought up the question of if you really made that comment, what does that do in our analysis? Does it require all different models? I don't think it does, but you guys are the expert. If we can get that answered off the shadow price of that constraint, then maybe we can answer that question.
And Reed, if I could give some context to the comments that Rudy made, a little bit more than what you did, which you're right, that was the time that it was addressed and the format. The question was concerning having a lack of capacity because of whatever the incident may be, that a unit, a resource is down and he has to increase it. And he said it could go, and he just said he could go up to, if the board says 25%, we need to move at 25%, it could be up to 25%, but he just gave that as an assumption. But that was the context that if need be, it's just, and so my thought process was when we're looking at the ERCOT market changing and then that number changes, that's kind of, it's a constraint now, but it would change based on the fact that ERCOT changes its reserve margin. But this is like above and beyond because we require to have more reserve, and that he has, of course, he reserves the right to do that. That was the context of it.
Yeah. John, you've talked about the sensitivity analysis on the reference case, referring to a similar situation as the winter storm. Do you believe that sensitivity on the reference case, which was over kind of on the right, I guess is on the right side. I can't remember the chart exactly. Well, you think that will answer that question, John?
Yeah, Reed, this is John Cossip. Yeah, regarding that 13.75% reserve margin, I guess constraint, or assumption in the modeling. I think that's adequate for long-range planning. When we talk, this could be kind of moving into the operational, kind of day-to-day or seasonal planning. So we'll take a look at this question also and respond to it. Some thoughts I have are that the extreme weather sensitivity is more a function of defining the cost or quantifying this reserve margin shortages. So it's more quantification, more cost related. Regarding reserve margin planning for long range, I think the 1375 is reasonable. And we'll take a look at, if there's a desire to do some sort of a sensitivity on a preferred case or something as we narrow down, maybe there's an opportunity to do that if that's desired. So that's just some initial thoughts, but we can also take this question and respond to it in writing.
Okay, I think y'all have got a first step in working with CRA and Burns and Mac and yourself on getting the growth of the demand growth kind of agreed to first, and then we can work on these sensitivities. Peter, I think I think they've got it. Peter, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have another question, Peter?
I do. I guess I'll just follow unless there's someone else that I'll wait and allow for someone else to factor in a question. I'll come back around. I don't want to take all the time at this point, and somebody has to drop off.
Nope, no problem. Femi, you're next.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My question actually follows on from Peter's question about the reserve margin. I mean, this is something that, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is something that's set to at least satisfy ERCOT's minimum requirements, which means CPS Energy can plan for as high as a margin as it wants, provided it exceeds what ERCOT requires. So in terms of analysis and the question at the MUC, it's hard to tell what that value would be as long as it satisfies the ERCOT requirements. Please correct me if that impression is wrong, please. Thank you.
Femi, some people weren't on when we kind of set the stage for this. We asked if they can, anyone that's got a video when they're speaking to turn it off, then you can turn it on, then you can turn it back off, just so people can see each other. But okay. I guess that's going to have to go over to John, or John, you can take it to somebody else if you think there's somebody else to answer that question.
Yeah, I'll address that one, Reed. Yeah, for Dr. Femi, I think my video just cut out, but at any rate, Dr. Femi, the reserve margin, there is no ERCOT requirement for reserve margin. It's a target reserve margin to meet expected reliability standards for the grid. So we've adopted that number based on that analysis. It's kind of our floor, our minimum reserve margin planning number, and we use it for long-range planning. So hopefully that helps clarify the reserve margin number and our starting point.
Okay. Did that answer the question, Femi, or do you have another one?
So before
it does. I guess it's more of just me understanding. As John said, there is no ERCOT requirement, but I do hear us referring to ERCOT's reserve margin. So the impression I had, as I said, was that there was it was a requirement. If it's not a codified requirement, but it's one that you like to work towards, then that's the clarification I was looking for.
Okay. All right. Let's just follow up on that, Femi. Do you have anything else, or should we?
No, that's it.
Go on.
That's it from me.
Okay, and so just so that I don't stumble around here, when you're when you're finished with your question, just say the word pass, if you would, so I'll know that you're finished. I don't want to cut anyone off. Okay, I do not see anyone else on here that wants to talk or ask a question, so we're back to Peter.
Thank you, Reed.
Kevin Pello is here in the room with me, and he wanted to follow up on John's question. So, Kevin?
Well, can you just put that on the chat there and we'll do it. Go ahead, Kevin.
Thanks, Reed. I just wanted to follow up on Dr. Femi's question. You know, as John said, ERCOT currently does not have a requirement, you know, for an individual utility like us in terms of a specific reserve margin target. Actually, ERCOT's number is not a hard requirement. It's a planning number that they use. As John said, we've adopted that ERCOT number and have planned to that level of reserve margin ourselves. And one of the reasons why we plan to have that type of reserve margin is we believe, you know, over the years it's important and it's been beneficial to our community to be what I would call generation long, right? That we have more generation available to us than our energy needs. That allows us to work through load growth, for example, if our community grows quicker than we may have planned, as we have units that have operational issues, you know, and come offline for maintenance. Having that reserve margin available provides that extra amount of generation to continue to, again, to protect have that generation available to protect our customers and not be exposed to the market when any of those situations occur. You know, I think we've talked about this in prior meetings is, you know, when that excess generation is not required on a daily basis, then, you know, that's where our sales to ERCOT, for example, come from, is from out of that excess generation. So before we moved on, I just wanted to kind of follow up on Dr. Femi's question. Appreciate the time there, Reed. Thank you.
No problem. Okay, back to you, Peter.
Yes, thank you, Reed. So I had posed this question initially when we were going through the measures and the metrics regarding the new energy efficiency program. It's a new STEP program, and I know everyone's aware that the previous program was successful in achieving 980 megawatts of power, and from the projections kept us from having to build another power plant, and that was over a 10-year approximate period. And the current plan has a 5-year with a 400 megawatt outcome. And with the 2 5 years in the 10-year program, it would be 800. And I know that our current need for capacity is greater than it was then because of the closures. And factoring it into the model as Charles River Associates has done in the reference scenario only. And my question is for the Burns and McDonnell, is your analysis of the value of that sensitivity right now, as it's going to be, it obviously hasn't come out yet. I thought it might come out before we had this meeting, but in our next meeting, we should see how that sensitivity plays in to the reference scenario. And I had requested that it would also be run in the other 3 scenarios, and my thought process being that with each one of those scenarios, there's different impacts on the potential for energy efficiency to be increased or decreased based on the economy. I wanted to get the feedback on that, if that's a valid concern, and that there could be changes in the different scenarios on how much energy efficiency is incorporated. And then second, as it's used as a metric, not just in the environmental scenario is where I'm seeing it as a measure, but I thought that it could be also incorporated into the affordability as well as reliability because of the demand response that it brings. And I know that John had shared that it was a complex process to incorporate it into those other scenarios. So just wanted to get the feedback if it was worth pursuing from your perspective.
This is the Bashish. I can start talking through, and then my colleagues can join in here. So energy efficiency, first of all, as you mentioned, we have only looked at the reference case and the base scenario. We haven't looked at any of the sensitivity analysis that has been done. right? And and what we are talking now is in general terms, and anything specific to any of the analysis that has been done, we'll talk about it once we look at the data. But in terms of energy efficiency, what we have typically seen is that as this is a bottom. It needs to be done in a bottoms-up approach. Like you need to look at the various efficiency programs and this is how much penetration is possible over the years. This is also very specific. It's to the particular utility, the demographics, and other of the customers who would adopt this energy efficiency measures. And so, based upon that, based upon the analysis that goes into the energy efficiency load forecast, the load savings forecast, we need to look into that. And and it is difficult to just say in general that there would be more or less energy efficiency savings from energy efficiency programs that has already been baked into the load forecast without looking into details. And again, we can assume that those sensitivities, but whether you also have to look at possibilities, because so as energy efficiency savings cannot not always be can go up to infinity, right? There has to be a certain point after which the adoption will sort of become saturated, and there will probably not be much further gains from energy efficiency programs. So in general, to answer your question, yes, it should be considered, and I'm pretty sure, I'm probably sure that CPS Energy and CRA, while they have doing this analysis, will have considered that. But whether that will be more than what has already been considered, that needs to be analyzed once we understand the underlying assumptions that went into the energy efficiency forecast.
Thank you for
Anybody
that
else?
answer.
I'm sorry?
Thank you for that answer, and I
Yeah.
look forward to seeing the outcomes from the sensitivity on the reference case coming up here in our next meeting.
Sure.
Okay. There's lots of folks on the call here. I'd just like to see if there's anyone that would like to bring up anything else for discussion or just general talk. I mean, this is your time. Continued people have said we don't have enough time to discuss these things, so sometimes in discussion, questions come out. If there's anyone that would like to speak, please put your name in the chat and I'll recognize you immediately. Okay, I guess there's this might be the shortest 2-hour meeting we've ever had. The only thing I'd add to ask is I've asked several times.
I put my name in the queue.
I just saw it, Dana. I apologize. Go ahead, Dana, please.
I'd like to go back to some of the questions that Femi was asking about the reserve capacity numbers that both ERCOT and CPS use. I'd like to know how those numbers get put together, because the experience of the winter storm, they had reserve numbers and they didn't work. And they have reserve numbers now that I'm not sure how they work or whether they're going to be effective. And I'd like some kind of analysis on that. As an example, they say whatever the reserve capacity is and it's adequate, as CPS just said. But is it really true? And each type of power generation has a theoretical reserve capacity. What's the real mechanism for figuring out if that percentage of reserve capacity actually is available? And I don't see that, and it obviously didn't work in Winter Storm Uri. And I have little confidence it will work on the expected outages that the Public Utility Commission says are going to happen on a regular basis in the future unless we change our systems. So discussion on that, please, from our advisors.
So let me again take a stab at answering this initially, and then my colleagues can join in again. So, uh, the you know from what we think, Winter Storm Uri happened for a lot of reasons, and one of the main reasons was that it was more from an operational standpoint because the features because of the low temperatures, the extreme temperatures, there were many operational issues rather than capacity that was not available. So it was not that there was not generating capacity available. It was just that because of extreme temperatures and the operational limits of those resources, some of those resources could not be brought online. That was one of the major issues there. But in terms of what, I think from an operational standpoint, that what happened in Winter Storm Uri is probably more addressed from an operational standpoint, right? We can have as much as resources as we want, but if they're not able to operate during those extreme weather conditions, then having those resources, whether you keep a 5% reserve margin or a 50% reserve margin, doesn't really help because those resources are not available. So not available to operate, or not able to operate at those extreme temperatures that happened there. So I think some of those has probably been addressed from an operational standpoint, and CPS Energy folks can talk about how they are sort of winterizing their resources so that those resources can be made available. Some of those resources can be made available during the during the extreme temperatures that was seen during Winter Storm Uri. And that is, again, as I'm saying, this probably being more better addressed from an operational standpoint rather than from a planning standpoint, if that helps answer your question. And I would refer to John from CPS to opine on whether they're working on winterizing their resources so that they could be kept operational during extreme temperatures.
No, it actually doesn't answer my question, because the discussion at the Public Utility Commission and ERCOT, for instance, not even during the winter storm Uri, but during hot weather last summer, the demand was met, admirably through at CPS and across the state, but by demanding that on-demand generation run 24/7. Now, and everybody knows that you can't do that on a regular basis because plants need normal maintenance. They break down. They're old. Most dispatchable energy generation has not been built for more than 20 years. We at CPS are talking about retiring dispatchable energy generation and yet buying stuff off the grid. So I don't see how that lowers the risk at the peak periods during winter and summer when we need energy. And I don't see how it can be a question of managing your generation capacity when it's mostly old and questionable whether it can continue to run during peak energy demand all the time. So I don't see this kind of thing being addressed by CPS or frankly, even at ERCOT. They're trying, but some of these solutions may require that there is on-demand capacity that somebody's going to have to pay for. So is it going to work? Who's going to do it? And what's the analysis of that? And that goes back to my original question and that of Femi about the question of is that reserve capacity that everybody quotes and supposedly we feel safe about is actually going to work? And eventually, I don't see how it can. Thanks.
This is Matt from 1898 Birds of Mac. I didn't know if I could add a little bit of color commentary. I think this is a really good area of discussion, and certainly I think an area that the industry is really kind of grappling with, because we're seeing a lot of changes in technology, aging resources. So there's both an operational and a long-term kind of planning aspect to this. And so it does, or it can be, you know, maybe somewhat challenging to follow both of those aspects in parallel. But, you know, one, just, I guess if we zoom out to the overall industry, other markets, you know, they have kind of capacity markets, reserve margin, compliance numbers that similar to if you think about ERCOT and the 13% number that was referenced, you know, that's probably a target that's set based on this reliability criteria and idea of saying we want to be reliable to avoid no loss of load, but for 1 day in 10 years. And so that number ultimately is a function, a unique function of the specific resources within the pool that you're trying to meet that kind of reliability obligation from serving load. And so as resources age, they become, you know, need more maintenance. They may go down more frequently. So that could be a reason to cause the number to go up unless you're replacing it with new, more reliable resources. Dispatchability, intermittency, those are things that come into play. We're seeing your neighbors from ERCOT to the north, SPP and MISO, they're doing some things to change how they're looking at resource adequacy and reserve margins. So SPP has just a year-round planning reserve margin that they're increasing from 13% to 15% starting next year. You look at MISO, another kind of neighbor to the north of ERCOT, they've tended to look at resource adequacy and reserve margin requirements on an annual basis as well. They are moving towards a seasonal resource adequacy construct, whereby they're valuing resources' ability to serve load in different seasons. So looking at summer versus winter, spring and fall as well. There's 4 seasons to MISO's construct there, but that also allows them to now look at those resources and say, how does something like solar, you know, provide capacity and or energy contributions in the summer versus the winter? Does have a different profile and different contribution. And these things are happening as we see generation mixes changing. You know, over time, those impacts can be slight, but then you can get to a point where maybe you've reached a tipping point, so to speak. And those are things that are hard to completely recognize exactly when that's happening, because it requires a lot of different decisions from a lot of different entities to build that overall kind of issue, make it come to a head where you've got to, you know, see the deficiency of resources. So there's a lot of things, and you know, California's had some close calls as well, and I think a lot of these it's a function of the resource mix changing, the dispatchability. I think we've got to look at and value dispatchability of resources, and then you got to couple that with, you know, carbon-free technology today doesn't necessarily couple with dispatchability very well, and so things like energy storage, long duration energy storage, those are all things that are going to be need to be looked at, and at what point in time in the future does that need to become a decision point? It's certainly things that we're seeing being contemplated in resource plans, and you know, whether it's a near-term action plan or a long-term, kind of somewhat depends on the glide paths you're on. But there's a lot of things going on. Resource adequacy and reserve margins are a very important part of that discussion. And I just wanted to add, or I guess for your all's just the discussion here, I guess that is something that other regions, other markets, other utilities are struggling with too. And I don't think there's one right answer yet that the industry is settled on. So I don't know if that helps, but there's certainly a lot of different focuses to this.
Thank you, Matt.
Well, I think a lot of people are aware of that, all those facts you discussed. Excuse me, if I don't understand who Matt Lind is. I wasn't here at the initial. Which organization is he with?
He's with Burns and McDonnell.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. I didn't hear the introduction. I apologize.
That's okay.
So if those other neighbors of CPS are looking into these things, is CPS looking into it too? I mean, I haven't heard.
Well, we've got a follow up here that Benny wants to try to answer. I assume that question. Dana, can we give Benny an opportunity to speak?
Of course.
Okay, Benny, go ahead.
Thank you, folks. Can you hear me okay? I'm in here with Ann.
Yes, we can hear you fine, and then we'll go to Acuna.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so first off, Matt, that was a great discussion. Thank you very much. And I appreciate you bringing in what the other areas are doing because you're right. Everybody's struggling with this one. Dana, you've got a great question and you're spot on. Our reserve capacity was not adequate to protect us during Winter Storm Uri. And honestly, that's why we're working through this generation planning process. We've got to build a more rugged, reliable generation fleet to support our customers here in San Antonio. And we're focused on that with all of your help and moving forward. I can tell you that Rudy's comment the other day about we're increasing our reserve margin, what he means is we've got some older, less reliable generation, the forced outage rate, the number of times the unit is not able to run because of a mechanical or electrical breakdown has continued to go up as they've aged. And so as a result, Kevin Paulo and his team will obtain additional backup power that during critical periods so that we can protect our customers. And so that's what he means by increasing our reserve margin. We're still using 13.75, as Matt explained, because of that 1 in 10 focus. Will that change over time as technology changes? It probably will, because there's different operating profiles for solar and wind and such than we've become accustomed to with natural gas, nuclear, and coal. So over a period of time, it'll change. Right now, it's the best number we've got. We're continuing to plan to that, but during periods of high demand, we still will make a commercial decision to ensure that we have adequate power to meet the needs of our customers. So that's our way of dealing with the reliability challenges we're seeing as some of our units are aging out. They're old and we hadn't replaced them yet. We need to. With your help, we're going to have a new generation plan, I think, by the first quarter of next year, and we're going to move forward and get it on the ground. But we're not quite there yet. I hope that helped a little bit. If not, please ask.
All right, let's get Anakwa in here so she can ask her question.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Yeah, my question is about the scenarios, specifically, how can a scenario have a positive margin, reserve margin, if it also relies on market purchases? And this is with regards to portfolio 6 and 7. Thank you.
Anybody want to take that from Barnes and McDonald?
Yeah, I can take that. So if I understand the question correct, you're saying that how can CPS Energy maintain a reserve margin of 13.75 if they're relying on market purchases? Is that correct?
Correct.
So again, to answer that question, we need to look at from a capacity standpoint as well as from an energy standpoint. The reserve margin that we are talking about is related to capacity, right? So it's the resources that you have that has the capability to generate. And so when we are talking of reserve margin, we are talking of from the point of view of the capacity side, right? And so that is what is required. You should have that additional capacity to be able to possibly meet any issues like the 1 day in 10 years, profile that Matt and Penny just talked about. Now, what you have seen in portfolios in terms of market purchases is basically there are two components to that. From what I understood, looking at the initially data, that some of the portfolios, there is a bridge capacity that is being purchased from the market. And that bridge capacity is basically a short-term purchase that you're doing because by that time you're not able to have all the new resources that CPS Energy is contemplating to build to be able to be available and be in service. So that's a short-term gap arrangement that you're doing, and that gap with the capacity that you're buying from the market, helps you come up with that 13.7, come up to that 13.75% reserve margin. Now, in addition to that, so when the resources get, that CPS Energy is contemplating gets built, and the bridge purchases or the bridge capacity that you're buying from the market will go away, right? But at the same time, you will still be able to have the capability to take energy from the market if it is required or if it is economical to do that. Right, and for that, the energy that you're buying from the market, whether that doesn't necessarily affect the reserve margin that we're talking about.
Let me see if I can summarize that. Some can get our hands around. Are you saying, Devesh, that the amount that is planned is installed capacity, the reserve margin is installed capacity by CPS Energy? It is that 13% is installed capacity. Whether it works or not, another issue. But if I'm hearing what you're saying, and what Anakwa asked is the capacity curve, including the 13%, 13.7%, is installed capacity and does not include purchases. Is that correct?
Again, Reed, it is correct. So again, you need to separate out capacity from energy. So that 13.75%.
That's why I used the word capacity, not energy.
Right. So the capacity could be any, a purchase resource, right? It doesn't have to
okay. And that it can be a purchase resource. Let me be more specific. Is it what I think Anak was talking about is spot purchases, day to day, 15 minute, 50 minute, not contract purchases. What is in that demand? What is in that capacity curve, if you will, if you want to use that word? Does it include short-term purchases, or does it just include contractual long-term purchases, so that we can all get a clear understanding of what's in that capacity curve?
Right. So if there is, the capacity curve that you see at the reserve margin, that would be installed or owned resources that CPS Energy has, plus any contracted resources that CPS Energy has, and that CPS Energy can utilize to dispatch during peak times, right? So
would that transfer to contract capacity as opposed to owned capacity?
Yes, you can have contract capacity, maybe, as I said, bridge capacity could be maybe, 1 year, 3 years till the time you have your own resources built.
All right, let me then turn to somebody at CPS before we go back to Dana. He's got in the queue. Is everybody comfortable with what was just said there, or
I have a follow-up to that, and that's about, does the reserve margin not account for capacity factor of each?
No, capacity factor is another different concept, and capacity factor should not be linked or with the capacity or the reserve margin, which is basically installed capacity. And capacity, and if you want, I can explain what a capacity factor is, but it is separate from this reserve margin discussion and should not be linked together. Okay.
Yeah. Sebastian, I would almost add
just a minute. Just a minute. Anakwa, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I've got Vinny in the queue, and then I've got Dana.
So, Reed, going back to the initial point, as we think about our reserve margin, it is the generation, the iron we have on the ground, plus our power purchase agreements. As you know, we've always used power purchase agreements for renewable energy so that we can monetize the tax credits for the benefit of our customers. So that would form our reserve margin. These daily, weekly, whatever contracts we put in place are not factored into that reserve margin. Those are the things Rudy was talking about that we layer on top of our reserve margin during critical periods in the market.
All right. Dana, back to you.
I'd like to move this conversation more, even for what Benny just said and what our advisors just explained, that it's all about this reserve margin should work. That's not what I want to hear. I want to hear a critique of will the system work? And I haven't heard that at all. And frankly, I don't see how you can assure that it's going to work when you use the same metrics that you used 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and you say you're going to do this, you're going to buy power on the grid if it's available. And I think that's one of the questions that are not going to happen. Yeah, you're going to use these reserve margins, but you're going to buy power on the grid. Is it going to be available? How do you know that? So then how can you construct a metric that says here's your reserve capacity when you don't even know what it's going to be? So I want to move this conversation, if it's possible, from this should work to this will work.
This is Ravi here. Can I just chime in, Reed?
Sure, go ahead. I'm sorry I didn't see you on the queue.
Yeah, and no worries, sir. But I think that is a very good question. You know, what has to happen for the system to not expose itself for like a Uri winter storm type of event, right? I mean, historically, you know, when this long range economic planning happens, you know, these very, very low probability, high impact events are seldom considered in those long range planning, right? But now I think we have had enough of those events, whether it is summer peaks or this Uri winter storm, you know, I think it is putting a burden on us to even consider in the many plethora of scenarios, you know, that let's say CRAI is going to evaluate. And I think that is the right way to at least hone in on saying, okay, how robust is my resource mix that is going to help me protect from this, you know, very low probability, high impact events, right? I mean, if you go back in time and look at prior to the Uri winter storm, what was the seasonal assessment, right, that came out from ERCOT, and that showed that there was enough generation to the forecasted load. But I think, you know, many things worked against that, that the load actually increased a lot, and then the gas availability and the shortages and all of this events coupled, and you know, what has happened is what has happened. So how do we consider that in a, you know, in planning purposes, you know, for whole of ERCOT, but then what is the role of CPS? So that CPS has an obligation to serve its customers, and what is the resource portfolio that's going to help them, you know, serve the customers at the minimum, right? I mean, that's what it is. And we are also mixing economics within this, so that's going to make it even more harder. I know we haven't really seen all the results from CRAI, but I'm going to, or at least my team is going to look into trying to get some understanding of, you know, what is the different outcome that might at least help address some of those concerns, that if and when extreme weather type scenario happens, you know, how well whatever resource mix going forward might put in a better position than what CPS was in the past, or the whole ERCOT system was in the past.
Dana, back to you.
You know, I hate to keep saying this, but that doesn't answer the question. And I haven't heard a discussion about something, is it really going to work? And we can't keep talking about theory all the time. We have to talk, will this actually work? And if it will, tell me how it's going to work. I haven't heard that at all.
Let me try to put this in, and then we'll go to Femi. We're looking at 9 portfolios over 4 scenarios. And then those 9 portfolios fit inside a bigger system. I think there's a couple of questions as I listen to people here that we probably, the whole group is interested in. One, is there a belief that ERCOT as a system will increase their resiliency or reliability, or the fact that it's you can respond and the system and the equipment will respond, will work? Is there a, as you go through these scenarios, are there some scenarios where it would put the put the risk of the system higher. It's a judgment thing. I mean, it's very hard to quantify, but from a judgment standpoint, that's what we've got to do. You potentially could say, this portfolio in this scenario is a higher risk of not performing than this portfolio in the same scenario. So I think while it's not an objective or a quantitative, it's a qualitative judgment that can be made. The second thing is, and that depends on whether you, as our consultants, believe that ERCOT is going to move in the direction of some of the studies like E3, that they will be adding dispatchable capacity to improve the responsiveness and reliability of the system, or not. We've been an energy-only world from a political standpoint, but from an operating standpoint, if we have some separation between the independent system operator and the politics, will there be more will ERCOT become reliable? And as we know, we had plenty of capacity during the winter storm. The capacity just didn't operate. So it's really two different things, as Ravi said. So let's try to get some understanding of that. And I'm going to return to Dana because he's got some comment here that he needs to speak, and then I'll go to Femi.
It's not a judgment thing. It either it works or it might work. And there's no reason to keep talking about it might work. And the stuff you're hearing out of ERCOT and the PUC is not definitive yet. So you can't base anything off of that. And frankly, I think that CPS should take cues from what might happen at PUC. They might mandate things. And so there's no reason to rush, I'm not sure we're rushing into anything, but to make these decisions on what we're going to do going forward when it might be a mandated change from ERCOT. And we cannot keep talking about stuff that's theoretical, even about future battery storage and everything, because who knows when that's ever going to work, if ever. So it's not a judgment thing. It's black and white. Does it work, or is it maybe might work? And I don't want to hear maybe all the time. And I was hoping that our advisors would form a critique of the plans that CPS has on the table and is thinking about, and give us some sort of analysis of that, not just some opinions about what is accepted in the industry, what is generally done, and how we have to blend all this stuff together, like you're making a horse by committee, which is what's happened in the past, and I don't see that's any different. So we have to think about a reliable system, of course, in the state, but protect ourselves at CPS if we can from the mistakes of the state, our own mistakes, and something that will actually work. That's what I'd like to, get this conversation about. Thank you.
Femi?
Yeah, those are very, very good points you made, Dana. And I think the discussion sort of is getting to that point where we're asking for really reliability, is how I look at it, even in the subject of, in the context of the reserve margin. I really wish we had more data, results, actual concrete numbers to work with here, so we can actually address Dana's concern for this arm waving that seems to be going on. And my big concern is, without those types of numbers that we can point to and say, what's this scenario, where's this piece in this scenario, we are going to miss our deadline. And that's my big concern. If at all we have a deadline for reaching a decision for the planning activities. But I'm going to go back to Peter's initial question, which was really coming from an MUC meeting comment, and not to put words or to try to interpret what Councilwoman Sandoval meant. I look at reserve margin very simple, as saying, how much cushion do you have? The more cushion you have, the more capacity you have that you may not need, but the more cost you have to bear. That's a very simple, fact. You put more margin, you're going to spend more to place that margin in place. Even though you don't use it, it's just giving you cushion, but it's costing you money. It's costing you something, and ultimately customers are paying for that cost of capacity that may or may not be used. That's one fact, but I want to just end up by saying I wish we had more data, more results that we can actually point to and begin to do the kind of critique that that Dana was referring to. Those are my comments. Thank you. Over.
Before we move on to Peter next and Kurt, does anyone from CPS want to go back over when they think the, we mentioned what we were trying to get, what you're trying to get out by the 1st. Does anyone want to elaborate on exactly what kind of financial data we're going to get? Or is it too early to do that? Okay, we'll move on to not hearing anyone speaking on that. We'll move back to Peter and then to Kurt.
Thank you, Reed. Femi, very good points on that cost component, because you're right, that's of course factored in, and that's going to be the bottom line. But then of course the reliability that Dana's speaking to is, and thank you, Dana, for harping on those points, and how do we get a more solid results. And again, Femi just mentioned not having the sensibilities run on that extreme weather scenario. And Femi, again, thank you for submitting that as a scenario that we look at, because that's really driving toward what Dana's talking about, not having the ability to have that reliability. But my question is, in the metrics that are going into that extreme weather, do you feel confident? I'm asking the Burns and McDonnell, knowing what you know about the system, the metrics that are set up in that particular scenario, that we would see the results that could give us more assurance which route we should take, knowing that that's worst case scenario and that's what we need to be planning for, with the reliability in the extreme weather scenario.
Over to Burns and McDonnell. Question on the table.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, I think the extreme weather scenario or the sensitivity that CRA is doing should be able to address some of the concerns regarding extreme situations that are being talked about, like winter storm Uri. But until we see the data and how it differs from the reference case, the base assumptions, and what is changing, it's difficult to really point or make any comments at this point. But the reason why the sensitivity is being done is to basically understand the robustness of the portfolio against the extreme weather condition, whether that particular, how that portfolio will hold up in this weather, the assumptions that have been that will go into the extreme weather sensitivity scenario or the sensitivity case. So I think that once we, that would address the robustness of the portfolio, or the total portfolio that CPS is considering for those scenario, will be, we will be able to see how that what the impact will be, and then make an assessment on that once we look at the results.
Okay, if that's not a follow-up from you, Peter, we'll move to Kurt. Then
Thank you. Pass.
Then we've got Chad that wants to talk about the financial data. But wait. Yeah, Kurt, you're up.
Yeah,
and then we got Al, and then we got Dana again. So let's go with Kurt. It's Kurt, Chad, Al, Dana. Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, maybe just following up on what Femi said. To me, the cost and cost recovery, how those costs are going to be recovered, is really at the core of this discussion, for me at least, about reserve margin and extra generation capacity. If in an emergency like we had, you have to pay whatever $9,000-$10,000 per megawatt hour, that's just signaling you want to run the capacity you have. You don't want to make that purchase. Then you go to that and you can't run the capacity you have. So this comes back to either maintenance and resiliency, which has a cost to it, or adding more dispatchable capacity, also with a cost to it. And all of this, pardon me, is ultimately solvable if you find the right percentages or the right rate of reserve or margin or extra capacity. And depending, of course, on, like others have said, what PUC or ERCOT's also going to do to us or mandate for the state. That's obviously part of it. But it's really going to come back to, this is solvable with money. I'll just say that crudely. And it's just going to come back to what is the cost going to be and who's going to pay
it. Okay.
Pass.
Okay, now we'll move and we'll hear about the type of financial data that we're going to receive before the November meeting, or at the November meeting, or when we are going to receive it. Go ahead.
Thanks, Reed. Hi, everybody. My name is Chad Hoopengarner. I'm with CPS Energy. I lead our financial planning organization. Apologies, I didn't quite get to the button early enough to speak up previously, but so look, we're going to have a variety of financial data that we will provide. At a minimum, we're going to share the revenue requirements, both for fuel or pass-through items and the non-pass-through items, the non-fuel revenue requirements, and in total. So we will share that for every portfolio, across all the scenarios and all of the sensitivities that will be done. We're also going to show that as a bill component, like a bill impact. So we'll show for residential, for small commercial, and large commercial. But it's important to point out that that can't be the only thing that we look at, because we have a rate design conversation to have subsequently, right? And so the balance of rates really matters. So the revenue requirements are important. The bill impact is important. Then we're also going to provide a sort of a cost per megawatt hour of each of the scenarios, so that you can get a feel for, what's the competitiveness of the cost of the energy that each scenario or each portfolio includes. And is that a competitive cost relative to the rest of ERCOT and relative to what we pay today for energy, or what the cost of energy is today? Now, there's a whole bunch of underlying financial data, capital, O&M. It feeds those revenue requirements. So once we produce that information that I just summarized for you, we're looking at it to see, well, are there other financial pieces underneath that need to be brought to light to really tell the story of how the different portfolios interact with each other, if that makes sense.
Any questions on that before we move off of that?
I have a comment since I'm next in line anyway, if that's okay.
Well, you're not, but go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Well, I'll wait for my turn then.
Okay.
I'll wait for my turn.
All right. Al?
Yes, sir. On the question in Dana's question, as opposed to this should work and this will work, are we taking these models? I think Dr. Femi suggested that we, instead of looking forward, look back. Take this new technology, had it been in place during the Winter Storm Uri, or during another hot summer event, how would those technologies have worked, and what would they have cost us at those times? Are those results going to be given to us?
Well, I think that goes back to the question that was maybe asked, is if you use those sensitivity analysis on the nominal case, they do look at those demands, but I'll let somebody from CPS or Burns and Mac answer that for you, Al.
So if this is the Bashish, so I think I think the analysis is going to be, and John from CPS or anybody else can clarify, is going to, we are looking in the forward direction. We are not doing any backcasting and looking how the resources would have performed back in 2021 when Winter Storm Uri happened. But what we are doing is, the analysis is going to do is basically look at how these resources would perform if, in the event such a event happens, such a rare event like Winter Storm Uri happens in the future. So that we are trying to replicate that scenario and try to see what the impact would be on the portfolio.
How does that answer your question?
Yeah, I gotta kind of squint my eyes, tilt my head, and look at it from that angle.
Okay. Now we got Dana and then Kevin.
So back to the question and something that Kurt elaborated on about that, you can fix this with money, which is true. And what I would like to have seen on one of the scenarios that was presented of the 9 would be something that will absolutely reliably work. But I actually didn't see that. And so whether or not it's a good idea, an unblended type of portfolio, which will absolutely reliably work with dispatchable energy, that should be a discussion because we know that'll work. And to continue going with a blend, which the state has done and CPS has done for about 20 years, I think it's fair to say that that system has not worked very well because it's gotten us into the trouble and the discussions we're having right now. So one of the points that we should make, whether it's money or not, is what can we do that we know is going to be reliable? And then what are the consequences of that? And this is going to be a committee decision, but that's the kind of thing that we at the RAC should be talking about. How do we get this system so we know that it's not going to have a few hours of blackouts in the summer or a few hours of blackouts in the winter, and once every 10 years a catastrophe. This is what we're trying to get away from. And unless we have the information on that and we can reliably make a decision on that, and I don't see that we can get that information while ERCOT and the legislature and the PUC are still discussing how or if to even do this. The CPS is not talking about this either. How can they make a decision on any type of system that is going to be a blend, which is no different what you've done in the last 20 years, which frankly hasn't worked? So, I mean, I don't expect our advisors to come out and give an opinion on that because so far they haven't done it. But I think we at RAC should talk about that. Are they actually doing this and will it actually work? And why keep doing the same thing? And what Kurt did say, and which will work, is if we're going to have to pay the tip top dollar to make sure we have power dispatchable to us when we need it, how much is that going to cost them? There's a number there. That's what we should talk about. And then if nobody likes that, then we go on back to what the blended rate is and just keep doing what we've been doing. But I don't understand why we don't talk like that.
Dana, let me just ask a question here of the folks that are doing the analysis. It was my understanding that the portfolio 1, the all gas portfolio, was as resilient or as reliable or as uninterruptible as they could identify. If that's not the case, then maybe I don't understand portfolio 1. Would somebody address that, John, or somebody, please? Because I had a misunderstanding then. If portfolio 1 isn't what Dana is describing, I need to understand that.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, Reed, it's Kevin Paulo. So you are correct. When we look at P1, we are adding all gas-fired generation. I mean, that's the basis of that portfolio. So it does not replace the existing wind and solar that we have today. But for the unit retirements that we're talking about, again, the Summers units, potentially the Spruce units, as well as load growth, all of that needed capacity under P1 is addressed or filled with new gas-fired generation. Like I said, that's the basis of P1. You're correct.
Okay, we have I'm back to Dana. If you have another comment, Dana, on that, please.
Well, my only comment on that is that with the Charles River analysis, I didn't understand that either, Reed, by the way. But what they did is they said, all right, let's do number one, 100% gas, but then it gets a black mark because it doesn't meet whatever the emission goals are.
Well, that's the trade-off. I mean, that's the whole list of metrics. Yeah, but it does address what you're saying. This is something that I think has a very, very high level of reliability or flexibility or functionality or whatever, and then you have to evaluate it. So let's if that doesn't do that, then we need to just have more discussion on that. Was there another comment, Kevin, you had, since you did put your name in here earlier, or was that the comment you wanted to make?
Actually, thank you, Reed. My comment was actually more related back to Al's question. So I do agree, Al, with what Dabasha said. We're not directly doing a backcast, but the extreme weather sensitivity scenario that we're running was designed to put these 9 portfolios essentially through winter weather that would look like Winter Storm Uri, and then believe that scenario also addresses extreme heat in the summer. So it's not a backcast out to kind of say what would 2021 have looked like with these new portfolios, but that sensitivity is designed to give that same answer just from a forward-looking view. So hopefully that it causes you maybe to not have to look sideways.
Thank you, Kevin. We have a comment from Anaqua. Anaqua, do you want to make your comment?
Yeah, specifically speaking to the reserve margin, even if CPS has 100% reserve margin, ERCOT could still come up short and CPS customers would be left in the dark. Yeah, that's kind of like a question / rhetorical question. And then secondly, with all respect, I feel like some of this conversation is erring on the side of fear mongering, specifically to some of Dana's points, and also bring in the reality that some people on the RAC are fall really short, if not are complete oil and gas lobbyists, and so calling that in and recognizing that as a conflict of interest as well. And then just speaking to, we're talking about like, let's not come up with scenarios that we don't know the answers to, but looking back to what actually happened during Winter Storm Uri, coal and gas failed us, and that was the source of, our $1 billion debt. And then this summer, I think it's pretty clear to a lot of us that extreme heat really put a stress on the grid. And had it not been for energy efficiency, weatherization programs, and renewable energy, we would potentially have seen another power outage scenario. And so just calling in some of those realities, and maybe someone would like to chime in and back me up that is a reality, because I feel like it's not being mentioned, and that we are erring on fear. And when we look back to things that have saved us, renewable energy, energy efficiency, and so just kind of wanted to bring that in to the conversation.
Okay, thank you, Anaqua. We do have in the queue here, we have Benny and then Michael Sanchez. Unless someone wants to reply on the comment by Anaqua, we'll move.
Yeah, I can start there, Reed.
Go ahead, Benny.
Okay, thank you. So Anaqua is right. even if we've got 100% reserve margin and ERCOT is short, then ERCOT will utilize our generation, and there would be rotating blackouts that we worked through before. So at the end of the day, we are an integral part of ERCOT. I believe we do more than our fair share in terms of providing generation for not only ourselves, but ERCOT as well. And Knock was also right. We have to pull all of the resources that we've got available to us together to serve our customers. Kevin has a team that's focused on that. What I wanted to go back to, and real quick, Dane, I wanted to just share, when we buy lithium-ion batteries, a lithium-ion battery for our use, 5 megawatt, 10 megawatt, 50 megawatt, 100, whatever the case may be, is a collection of very small batteries. It's a lot of them put together. And when battery manufacturers put together a response for our request for so many megawatts of capacity, they put extra capacity in that battery cubicle. And that's how they assure reliability, because they know that some of those batteries over the operating life of that unit will fail. And we do the same thing with our generation. We know that all of our units are mechanical, electrical machines, and there's things that will happen to them. And when they do, we're prepared to deal with it. We've got proactive maintenance programs in place, and we've also got reactive plans in place to deal with breakdowns that we're not able to prevent otherwise. And the way we've always managed that is to have more units than we need, the same concept the battery manufacturers use. We call that being long in generation. That will be the case going forward also. Now, our challenge is to be as economical as possible about that, but we have to look at the capability, the statistical analysis of the reliability of equipment, and then we have to get extra just to make sure we can meet our demands. And that's the way we've always ran our systems. In the early days with all gas units, we still had extra capacity. We had extra gas units, peakers, where they were available if we needed them. I can remember in the very early days when I started my career with Houston Lighting and Power, we had long generation. We had extra units that only ran during certain times just to make sure we could deliver. And that concept is still alive and well with us today. When we go to a solar site, we'll install more solar panels than we need just to protect ourselves and make sure we can deliver for our customers. I hope I'm helping a little bit and trying to explain how we manage the reliability of individual technology.
Thank you, Benny. Michael Sanchez.
Thanks, Benny. That was a good explanation. That leads me to think here then that is somehow, are we able to forecast what ERCOT's requirements will be and what our requirements as far as CPS goes to be able to fulfill ERCOT's requirements in times of need? That way we are not falling short here in the San Antonio area. Pass.
Anybody want to take that question from Michael?
Hey, Reed, it's Kevin Paulo. I'll take that. I think when we look at how we plan our system, we look at CPS Energy's needs, and we've talked about that, I think, through the process of this summer and the various meetings we've had with this group of people. It was looking at, we're a growing community. We look at our load forecast and how much capacity we need, including a reserve margin, as Benny had described, to meet our community's needs. And we look at that also in light of what's going on in ERCOT and how fast we think ERCOT is growing. Ultimately, we are a part of ERCOT, and the value of us making sure that we plan to have adequate capacity to meet our needs with some extra, again, to manage reliability issues, as Benny talked about, is the basic strategy that we've used and plan to continue to use to ensure that we have capacity here to serve San Antonio. So that it protects our customers in terms of price protection, right? We're not exposed to the markets of ERCOT, and other generators throughout the state aren't building, say, quickly enough to keep up with ERCOT or keep the reserve margin. You know, ERCOT's reserve margin does fluctuate, right? It's, you know, they're looking at high 20s into the low 30s over the next 5 years or so. But as recently as I think 2018, 2019, they were in single-digit reserve margin. So by us having enough capacity that we either own, operate, or have contracted for, we're able to ensure that our customers pay the cost of our generation or what we've contracted for, and don't get exposed to, you know, the market. Because again, as those reserve margins get tighter, the pricing within the state, within ERCOT, tends to go up. If our customers are still price protected, if you will, at the cost of our generation, you know, that doesn't change, right? So that, hopefully, Michael, that helps to address your question on kind of how we look at the planning of CPS Energy and our community's needs versus in how we integrate that with what's going on at the larger state level at the ERCOT market. And you're happy to answer any follow-ups.
Thanks. Appreciate that. Just, I guess the long pole in the tent is what I have no doubt that CPS is doing a good job of forecasting the requirements for the customers, CPS customers. I just suppose the long pole in the tent, I take it, is trying to figure out what ERCOT's demands are, and that's all I have. That's my comment now.
So one other quick follow-up to that, and that's, in my opinion, you know, one of the benefits, again, of having generation. You know, one of the sensitivities that we are going to look at is, you know, the build versus buy, right? And so, and again, the buy scenario isn't, you know, relying on the spot market, so to speak, in terms of buying power today, right, to meet today's needs. But it's, instead of, say, owning a gas-fired generator or, you know, a solar farm, for example, you know, we would be contracting to have somebody else will build it, somebody else would own it, operate it. We would just purchase the power through a long-term purchase power agreement. Well, again, depending on how ERCOT builds out, those types of contracts can become more expensive because, again, there's more demand for limited availability. So I think that is one of the considerations when we look at a build versus buy scenario, is kind of control of our own destiny versus relying on what other people throughout the state are choosing to do or choosing not to do.
Okay. Now we have Dr. Cantu, ad leader.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the talk today. And I just wanted to say that, Dana, I appreciate the questions you're asking, and I think reliability is important for us. Is it going to be working? But I think what our experience from Hurricane Uri is that there are other things that impact whether the reliability is there or not. ERCOT, for one. So I appreciate the question, and I don't know if that's ever going to be an answer that we can get. I do also want to appreciate what Anakwa had to say as well. We do need to move forward. We do need to move forward in other sources or other means of getting energy. And we know that the cap, which we do need to keep in mind, is asking us to generate our power without coal in the coming future. And I just want to be sure that we continue keeping those things in mind as we have these discussions. No question, just thank you for letting me say that.
Sure. Okay, let me see what I've got here in the queue. Give me a minute. Don't have anything else in the queue, assuming that Kevin put his name in and already addressed the question he wanted to address. I see no one else here. The only thing that I would ask our consultants to look at and try to validate, and it's a question I brought up several times, it continues to stay in, is the nominal case, base case, still has a carbon cost starting in 2027. I've tried to make the point that we've just had a very liberal Congress pass an environmental plan that did not put any cost in. they were all carrots, no sticks. So I would like that, I'd like to determine whether that cost curve is still appropriate to leave in. Okay, I'm going to leave it open here for another minute. Let's see. I see no one else, so we will, at this point, oh, wait a minute, Anne Marie. Thank you, Anne Marie. You're in. Go.
Thank you. I'm not always fast enough on the buttons. I just wanted to also add my comments along with Adelita's and yours and the other folks, especially where you just mentioned that everything's all carrots and no sticks. You know, I understand that the focus of many people are to try to get in line with the whole moving away from coal and other things. But I just want to keep in mind that it is all carrots, no sticks. And then there's the reality of what's happening in the rest of the world, you know? And so minimizing the use of the sources of energy that are
early on,
that are less desirable, you know, that's fine, but eliminating them, I just don't see that happening. And that's the reality. That's my comment.
Thank you, Anne Marie. I'm going to stall around here a minute to see if we have any more comments. If not, we're going to adjourn until the next session, which I believe is between 4 and 6 today. I got my calendar right. Stalling.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Right.
Stalling. Going. We're gone. Thank you all very much. Appreciate everybody's attention and cooperation and participation. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.